Hello and welcome to the October 14th, 2021 edition of the Byrdcliffe Forum, a project of the Woodstock Byrdcliffe Guild in Woodstock, New York. I'm Doug Shear, lead of the Forum Committee. Today, we're featuring a Woodstock Master artist, Judy Pfaff.
He's reading.
Interviewed by David Ebony of Art in America magazine. This Zoom event is recorded and archived and will soon be deployed to the Byrdcliffe Guild's YouTube channel. Comments made by our guests are theirs and do not reflect those of Byrdcliffe.
Coming into my ears.
Near the end of this session, you can address comments or questions to Judy via the chat function in Zoom, from which David will select. You may indicate your name if you wish. David will be introducing Judy. David Ebony is currently contributing editor of Art in America, formerly its managing editor. A senior editor at Snap Editions, New York City, he is author of David Ebony Art Books, a regular feature column for Yale University Press online, and a frequent contributor to ArtNet News and Garage Magazine, among other publications. He received his MA in art history from Hunter College, New York, where he studied with theorist Rosalind Krauss and artist Robert Morris. David Ebony is also an independent curator. Among his recent exhibitions are Grasshopper, a Judy Pfaff survey at CR10 Linlithgow, New York in 2016, and Metropolis at Edward Tyler Nahm Gallery, New York in 2015. He is the author of numerous artist monographs, including Julio Larraz, Rizzoli Electa, 2021, Enoch Perez, Liberty and Restraint, Dallas Contemporary Mouse, 2019, Beatriz Milaz, Taschen, 2017, Arnie Svensson, The Neighbors, 2015, Anselm Ryle, Mystic Silver, 2012, Emily Mason, The Fifth Element, 2006, Craigie Horsfeld, Relations, 2005, Carlo Maria Mariani, 2001, and Graham Sutherland, a retrospective, in 1998. He lives and works in New York City. David.
Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you for naming so many of my books. And I wanted to start out by saying I'm always honored to be in the presence of Judy Pfaff because she's one of the most significant artists to emerge in the last half of the 20th century. In 1975, she came on the art scene and initiated a movement which became known as installation art. And today, she's known for her paintings, one of which is behind me here, as well as sculptures, freestanding sculptures, but especially for these phantasmagoric, incredible, all immersive environments that she has created around the world. I've been privileged to see a number of them in person, and the next time one appears near you, don't miss it because it's incredible. She just recently did one in Hudson, a Pamela Salisbury gallery, which we'll be talking about in a little while. But let me just tell you a little bit about Judy Pfaff's background. She was born in London, but she lives and works in the United States for a long time. She's the recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Fellowship in 2004, which is, as you may know, widely regarded as the Genius Grant. And we'll ask her a little bit about what it was like to receive that. I've always wanted to ask her that actually and have not. She's had many exhibitions around the world, and her work and her vision and her outlook on life in person and through her artwork is unique. So please help me welcome the incomparable Judy Pfaff.
Thank you, David. We met mostly doing this show in Linlithgow at CR10, and David curated that, and was so much fun, sort of, because I don't think you actually knew what I was going to do particularly, but you had a lot of faith, and the studio was full of things that I don't know if I ever suggested how they would go together or not. But the interesting thing about that show for me, it was in a barn that was about 150 feet long. There were no walls. So I had to figure out how to put a show together that you kind of walked down, and there were like events that spilled out. And downstairs, I made these movable walls with lots of movable, meaning they spun. They were on they were pivoted. So it was a kind of complicated show, a lot of welding, a lot of imagery, but also because of who had the space and where it was. Francine Hunter was a practicing Buddhist, and I had known her from Tribeca days in the early 80s, late 70s. So a lot of the imagery had a lot of Buddhist references and stupas and domes, and it had a nice kind of when you walk on like a pilgrimage, you kind of went down and back, and there was a story sort of that laid out in that. So what was nice is I think David and I became good friends because it kind of worked, I think. And
yeah. And one of the wonderful things was when we worked on the catalog, because the catalog came out after the show was up, I was able to write about the experience of going through that piece. So, you know, Judy, you always offer a unique experience for the visitor. And I often wanted to ask you how much of the audience experience do you anticipate in advance of the show?
I have to tell you, David, I don't anticipate. I mean, I expect many things. Everyone sort of sees, because it's not laid out with a text panel telling you what it is. You're kind of left to make it up. But I think if you're paying attention, you can see repetitions or images that come and go that might fill out things. In that particular show, you ended up with these giant mandalas on the floor. So I think you kind of, if you were so inclined, you might be able to tell that story. I'm not sure. I think
we have some images. Can we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good.
This was called Grasshopper, which
it's a funny title. I just loved it. I don't know why, because it doesn't mean much of anything, except I was giving everything animal names for a while there, and turtle and grasshopper seemed nice because it just kind of bounces along, and so it means nothing and everything. So I think you can see it's a very long space. You can keep going, yes. And these are these mandalas on the floor. There's a lot of landscape. I think you can see.
This one, you could hold this one a lot.
Yes.
This was really arresting when you came up to the second floor. This was what the viewer saw, the overview.
Yeah, overview. And I think you can tell that there's I made this chandelier there, and light bulbs have been an increasingly important feature, not just to kind of give light, but it just changes how you see things. And you'll be able to tell there's lots of color sort of everywhere. And the light under that dome was very significant. It really lifted it up. And I don't know if there's a slide here, but half of it was white, as you see, and the other half was black. So when you walked around, it was like the moon, it kind of had, it it moved in that way. Yes, you can see there. So this is the end of probably 150 feet there. And I don't know, it also, what was important to me is I knew on the horizon was this show in England, and it was similarly long. It was 180 feet, but it was an old tithe barn. And it also, I couldn't use the walls on that. So this was like a kind of miniature run through for that show in England with a completely different storyline. But I didn't know if I could handle a space with nothing on the walls. I'm so used to, I think because I was a painter, I'm sort of used to backing things up with kind of mural-like things. So it for me, it was easier to do. So I was really proud that you could walk it, there were things to see, there were surprises, there was holes cut into the floor, so a lot of the vines came through the floor. There were smaller pieces downstairs as you walked in. So it was a pretty, as David said, it was sort of a survey of images from, I don't know, maybe a 10-year, 5-year span. Most of it was newly made, but the materials and the images were from a kind of past, like the cone, the upside down cone, and the dome.
Maybe this is a good moment to talk about your past.
Yeah.
To give some background, how you arrived at this point.
Yeah. Let's see. Born in England, moved to Detroit, got married at 16, moved to Newfoundland, went to Wayne State for a little while in Detroit, then lived in Sweetwater, Texas for a little bit, then went to Southern Illinois University, then lived in England, then Sweden. So by the time I was probably 24, I'd sort of done all of those things. And when I got back from Sweden, I was an au pair girl. And then I went to Washington University, not because I even got into Washington University, but the fellow I had been living with before I left moved to St. Louis. And I met the painting teacher named Arthur Osver. And he had paintings in the museum there, and I really liked them. And I wrote to him and said, I want to study with him. And he just got me in school. I had kind of funny, random snippets of credits, but we got on very well, and he sort of protected me. And then I went to Yale summer school. He put me there. And then after that, I went to Yale, and that's where I met Al Held, which was probably the most significant mentor, relationship, friend until he died, which was
what was it about Al Held and his work specifically? Was it a personal encouragement, or was it the work itself?
He was a tough guy. He was from Brooklyn, and he didn't. I think that he went maybe to the 8th grade. I don't know if 8th or 9th. He didn't go through high school. Really smart, kind of dyslexic. But when he met me, when I brought all these paintings from St. Louis, I built a trailer, built the box, put it on a trailer, drove it there. It was a huge box. It was like 8 feet by 12 feet, I think. And he said, he said something like, well, I'm not that keen on the paintings, but that box is terrific. So we sparred a lot. I think his another opening line, which I have repeated a few times, he said, so you're the new dumb blonde. And I think I retorted like, and you're the janitor, so that was, and he just couldn't believe that I was as uneducated, not as an artist, but like I didn't know much about art history. So he sent me downstairs into the library at Yale and across the road to the museum, and kind of quizzed me, like, what did I think of this or that? And then he would come into the studio, and he wasn't the nicest. And so I think a lot of people, you either liked him or lumped him, but I thought he was so smart, and he looked like Marlon Brando. So obviously I paid attention, and, you know, he was just, he liked to go to movies. There's nothing much to do in New Haven, but there was a great theater. So we were always going to movies like Shaft, or, I mean, just sort of crazy movies. And
He was
I
very
thought it was totally fun. Yeah, those are the smaller pieces down the stairs there.
he was very charismatic, but
Oh yeah,
the
fantastic.
work
Yeah.
the work was so challenging. His work, and my professor in undergrad was Tony Robbins,
Yes, who loved him.
painter,
Yeah.
who you're in a show with right now at Bard, which
Mm.
is a fantastic show of the pattern and decoration
Oh, those
movement
are
at
the.
Hessel.
Oh
But
yeah.
I had a brief
Yeah.
conversation with Al Held once about the fourth dimension, because as you know, Tony Robbins has written a lot about the
Yeah.
fourth, dimension and fifth
Yeah.
dimension and such. And he denied that that was part of his work.
Yes, I
so
can see him
directly.
saying that. Yeah.
But I see that in your work. I see this element of time as being very important in
Yeah.
how you view, a Judy Pfaff installation.
Yeah.
And the idea of time is always very prominent in everything you do, really, even in the two-dimensional works that you see here.
Yeah. I think what I realize, and I don't really think about the work quite this way, but I don't like it when things settle in. I like it if there's a nervousness or a quivering or an uneasiness or a kind of almost like a funny kind of danger. And usually the work comes off the ground. It usually never sits. There's not a lot of weight that you can see. Everything is floating. And that thing about you see one thing and you might get an idea, but then the next thing cancels that. And you mentioned that to me yesterday, David. It's like natural, organic, inorganic, architectural, and
you're always playing with this idea of the artifice versus nature.
Yeah.
I wrote several of them down that are continually appear in the work. Chaos versus simplicity.
Yeah.
Chance versus determination, and complexity. Ultimately, your direction is toward
yes.
that.
I do, when you read like 100 Years of Solitude, there's a funny kind of like, you think you know what you're reading and then it slips away and then somebody else enters the conversation. It just is a myriad of images that keep sliding by. And I also wanted you to notice on this one that there are fantastic Chinese lanterns, which I get like 20 of them for $1. I mean, so that thing about cheap and rich and here and there and, throw away and all of this stuff is made, by the way. I used to think that someone thought there was this fantastic garbage can that I rummaged every day to get this stuff, but no, I make it look like it's not,
You melt them a lot.
I melt them. Yeah. I melt things a lot, and fire is a big deal. And I like that you think about time. I always thought that I was making little movies or something, so that it just existed in time, and it's fleeting, like a stage set, like a play. If you're there, it exists. If you're not, it doesn't. So the installations really have a very limited lifespan. And that's the good and bad news. Yeah.
So we got a little bit away from,
Yeah.
you were talking about your background and how instrumental Al Held was.
Yes.
And then, by the way, everyone, if you have questions, you can please, write them in the chat box and we'll look at them toward the end. I just wanted to remind everyone of that. But to go back to your past, your history, so Al Held was this instrumental person, and then how did you launch your career? How did that develop?
He did that. He had just done a show with Marcia Tucker, a full-out show at the Whitney Museum, a fantastic show. And Marcia Tucker was curating a show in 1975, and she wanted to know, she had talked to Al, did he know anybody, you know, from Yale who he thought was interesting? And he put forth my name. So that was Al. And then I met Irving Sandler, who ran Artist Space. And that opened in, I think, 73. I graduated in 73. I showed there in 74 with, and Al Held chose me. Now you have to understand, Al didn't particularly like the work. It wasn't that. I think he used to tell me stories of Eva Hesse, and he loved her a lot, as did everybody who ever met her. And he kind of thought I reminded him of her energy, not the work, but something about that. I mean, he sort of suggested that. And he also—
What about the experimenting with materials, with unusual combinations of materials?
Yes, I mean, I think he actually did like the work, but he also was married to Sylvia Stone, who used plastics, heavy duty plastics, thick, like inch thick, huge pieces, you know, 4 by 12 sheets of plastic. And it was not taken really well. So I think he also was kind of protected Eva Hesse with her strange materials, and his wife, Sylvia. So that might have helped him understand what I was doing, or at least be sympathetic, you know.
Was there, I mean, this is a little off point, but was there a difficulty being a woman at this point in the machismo of the 70s, minimalism?
Oh, good. Let's see now.
Can you
When I
talk
was,
about that and how
yeah,
the feminism?
yeah. I mean, the trouble is I always liked the guys, so that was sort of, you know, but there were no women. I mean, it was really funny. I remember talking probably to Alan, the faculty at Yale, about Louise Bourgeois, and they just were like disgusted by that work. And I think they thought Eva Hesse was so cute, but she couldn't make a cube if her life depended on it. You know, like it was too transparent, it was too gooey, you know, but you know, they knew she was good and
Boy,
smart.
were they wrong, huh?
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so wrong. And I love that. I love that they were so wrong. There were very few women in my class. For a while, I thought I was the only one there. I did think there was a great, wonderful friend named Joyce Owens, who was there with me too. And, you know, Stanley Whitney was in that class, and I don't know, Nabil Nahas. There were a few artists you might know of, but I got lost where I was going with that, David. So
about women.
I'm looking at this piece here. I love this
women
piece.
in the art. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't think there was not one woman on the faculty, and it's so interesting. Right now at Yale, about 5 years ago, they hired a woman named Marta Kuzma, and she is the first woman, first dean. So they were not open, or I don't even think they knew they weren't. I think they just, if they made decisions based on quality, I guess they just thought the guys had all the quality. I don't know. But yeah, and coming to New York City, I went immediately to Soho. My first loft was $150 with 2,000 square feet on Grand Street and Green. And there were very few women to look up to. Like I said, there were the wives, you know, Paul Brock and Mimi Shapiro, there were, I'm sorry, Elizabeth Murray. Elizabeth Murray was the first woman artist who I just, I just couldn't imagine how cool, she was not only a kind and good person, but she came to my shows and invited me to her place. And she had been a mother in her early 20s. And then she had another baby at 42 and then another at 44. She was astonishing in terms of I didn't know Dorothea Rockburn except for a moment. But there were women artists coming about, but they didn't seem to get a lot of respect. And I'm so happy that's changing like crazy now. So
yeah, but for you too,
yeah.
when you were very
Yeah.
young, you
Yeah.
were the 1975 Whitney Biennial was your big breakthrough, correct? Yes.
The reviews on that show went something like, "This is the worst show I've ever seen. This is the worst biennial in the whole universe of biennials. You should throw it down the tubes in the gutter."
But for your career,
No, it was so disappointing. I mean, I get disappointed because I think this is the Whitney Biennial. This is.
how did you wind up in the Whitney Biennial?
That's
1975?
actually, that's a very funny story because Marcia Tucker was given a mandate to not have New York artists in the show, or the preponderance of New York artists in the show. So she went all around the country to find people from California and Texas and wherever. So I happened to be teaching at Ohio State University. So I got plugged in as an Ohio artist. So I thought that was like very funny. So I got in because I was an Ohio artist, and she thought, and she knew of me. So
that is very funny.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
But everything is like that, David. Everything. It's like serendipitous, and
And then who was your first dealer?
Holly Solomon.
So Holly was very instrumental for a lot of artists in that period.
There's that show right now at Bard, and
Pattern and Decoration, yeah.
Pattern and Decoration, and no one hardly remembers that. I mean, they do remember that Holly was the one, but they don't mention it and they don't credit her. And she, never got, I think because she was so pretty and rich and was kind of wacky, but had great taste. She was the first one to show Sigmar Polka, Gordon Matta Clark, Laurie Anderson, actually even Schnabel first showed there. So she was something, and she is the only dealer I've ever had. When I was finished, kind of making over her space, she would say, "You could do the basement if you wanted, or you could do the office if you wanted." I mean, she loved like watching things being made in front of her. When she came to visit me, I was in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and it was really a rough time. It was in the mid-'80s, 85. And she would drive up in a black limo with a white fur coat, like it couldn't be a white mink, but that's what I thought it was. And in stiletto heels, and all the children would come running out. And I thought they were going to be like freaked out. They thought she was the most beautiful, like this apparition came to Brooklyn, and she loved them. She was so cute, with them, and so nice. And they turned around and said, "Judy, this is how you should look. This is what, like real people look like, So I don't know. She was fantastic in the studio. And I don't know, she treated me like I was very special. And I don't think I'd ever sort of had that before.
And there was never sales pressure.
No, that's not true. Holly, dealers love to sell. It means if you sell something, it means you have good taste and you're brilliant. If it doesn't sell, after a while, you really lose, not respect, but you think, I sort of made a mistake. Maybe this artist isn't as good as I thought. So no, Holly loved sales. She would say, if you got yours together, we could make real money here, So, so there.
So that was part of it. I wanted to ask you before I get too far along about an unusual question. What is the worst experience in your long career? What is the worst experience you have had in the art world?
I guess being dissed. I was at a party at Don and Mira Rubel's after the 81 biennial, actually. And Julian Schnabel was there. And he kept bumping into me, like literally, like smashing into me. And I remember thinking, why, what, I think I had more space than he had in the show. And I heard somewhere that irritated him. So things like that, I think every artist will say this, like, or maybe they don't, but after a show, there's just this complete letdown, because a lot of times with some of these shows, I think occasionally I think, I did it, that really looks good. Whoever they are, gonna like this. And you don't hear a word. This show that you're looking at in England, this was in this 13th century tithe barn in a small town called Tisbury in Wiltshire. And not one review, not one comment, nothing. It was up for 2 months. It took me a year to pull it together.
Was it difficult to get to? Was it in the middle of nowhere?
Well, not really, because Hauser and Worth is 20 minutes away in Somerset. What's it called? Stonehenge is similarly close in a different direction. Salisbury, the big town, it's 2 hours on the train, pretty nice train from London. And, people, most of the people in these small towns are quite old, and they're they're like country farmers, or they have estates, but it's like kind of not like Downton Abbey, but they have architecture, but they don't have money. So they are very sophisticated. They caught all the references to the architecture. That column that you see sometimes appearing is a direct, it's the same proportions as the columns in Salisbury Cathedral. The place, the post and beam things that you see there were using the holes that when they built the building, they built the scaffolding using that. So, yeah.
Can we go back a little with the images and look at this you had in mind?
Oh yeah, it's sort of a big clock. There were like 12 dishes, and it has these not spinning, but circles that go into each other. So it's like, if you go to Salisbury Cathedral, there's the world's first clock still working there. And it has these funny, circles and stuff in it. So, but also the circles and those white circles on the floor, that's chalk. And in this area, the whole landscape is actually chalk. So I just,
and could the audience move through it as they?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
I don't like black rooms with curtains, and I don't like places that say don't touch or don't walk, So no, everybody could walk everywhere. And you can tell it's a beautiful space. And as you went down, you can see how simple it gets at the end. That's the Salisbury column there.
So you constructed that whole thing. That's
part
of the space.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's a series of tubes on the bottom. There's a kind of you can see that's a big photograph. It's 10 feet in diameter photograph of the sky. A time lapse photograph of the sky spinning at night. The stars.
You use a lot of Photoshop photos in the work.
I do, really stupid Photoshop. Like, if you get one step into Photoshop, you lose your mind. So I just press one button, and if it does it, and it looks good, I hold it. So no, I'm not. I do enough technology to get the image I want, and that's about it.
what was your title for this work?
They titled it, but because I'm very bad finding titles, but I called it Tivoli to Tisbury, a romance.
Oh, that's nice. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, at least it lives on in these beautiful
The
images.
photo, don't they look nice? Don't they look nice, those photos? But
Will
you
you
should
do a
walk.
book?
You could have this. You know, it's the largest thatched roof in all of Britain, right? In all
Wow.
Christendom. I mean, it's so. And they restored it. The fellow who owns thousands of acres, I guess, in England, in Wiltshire, paid for the restoration, and he has a good relationship with the fellow who brought me. Oh, and how I got this show. Interesting. Loretta Howard and Pavel Zubak, I had a double show there, and he had worked, his name is Johnny Messam. His father is a venerated dealer in London on Cork Street. And he came to the show, not to visit me, but to visit Loretta, but my show was there. And in 1 minute, he said, how would you like to come to England and do a show? I've just got this new space, you know? So that's how that happened. And because I'm English, and because I'd actually worked in a macrobiotic farm on a Rudolf Steiner college, and I was going double back. You know, I was born there, and then I went back in the 60s, and then I'm back here in the 2000s, something or other, 17 or so. So it was like really was all these memories, and I wanted to honor the landscape, the history, the kind of deep kind of vibe.
Yeah,
there.
it makes me want to ask the question, when has your work changed since you moved to the Mid-Hudson Valley? I mean, this particular work seems to tie together your English background and your current working situation in the Mid-Hudson Valley. How has that affected your work?
Unbelievably, when I first, you know, I teach at Bard College, and when I first was there, I was living in a tugboat factory on the Roundout, which had 60-foot ceilings. It had other spaces. Mine was probably only 20 or so feet, but it was at 10 feet away was the river. And when I would look, and my living area was really tiny, unlike now, which I have a sort of deluxe place, but it was really tiny. And out the window, you would see herons, kayaks, pleasure boats, you know, Pete Seeger's boat. I mean, it was just like a child's view of, you know, boats and stuff. Anyway, so all of a sudden, I'm like, it was showing at Andre Emmerich, and I realized that the relationship of his Fifth Avenue gallery and 57th Street was basically the same as the river outside my place. So the whole piece was kind of about this flow and this river, and I put holes through the walls so you could see the cars. And because he always kept, Andre used to say, if you open a window, they'll always look out, because life is much more interesting than looking at an art object. And I thought, you're absolutely right. And I want you to do that, you know, so I had lots of views out. So at least you could, I find galleries to be very claustrophobic, and I don't like them.
Well, but this was your recent gallery show in New York.
Yes.
At McHenry Gallery.
Yeah, Miles McHenry, yes.
Miles showed these.
Yes.
And these are more like self-contained relief sculptures.
Yes.
And can you, I just wanted to know, can we go back to one object? Yeah, like this particular work?
Yeah.
How do you start with drawings, or how do you conceive these pieces?
I think well, you can see that they all are, you know, 3 pieces of 4x8 material. It's actually not homosote. Anyway, not foam core. Anyway, it's 4 pieces. It's not plywood, but it's a composite board. And so there's the background is mostly floral images from old botanical books. So I think I started with that. I think a lot of these things, ideas ricochet. Like all of a sudden, I'll see a pattern appear or a color, and I'll think, oh, I have something that relates to that. So this one I like. You can't see these images, but they're all from Chinatown. And I do love Chinatown more than China, to tell you the truth. So, so if you looked at them, you can see people, you can see all the kind of objects, and the kind of, when you go into Chinatown, it's just kind of crazy, the stores, and this color just starts adding up. And so there's a lot of camouflage going on in a lot of these works. So you kind of don't know where I think.
So how much of this is photo imagery and how much is painting?
There's
one of the things I find fascinating about these works is how it's really difficult to, you sort of unbalance the viewer in a way that the viewer feels disoriented spatially, even though they're just shallow reliefs.
Yeah.
It's hard to say what's painted, what is a 3D element, and photo images.
Yeah.
So for instance, in this one, and then you have, just to even complicate the issue, you have actual framed works on paper as part of the relief sculpture.
Yeah.
And you make your own frames for those.
I do. I used to be a framer for Jed Bark. So, and I don't know if artists will know this, framing is really expensive. And you have to give them framers lead times, and there's a kind of standard issue, So if I can make them, then it's faster, cheaper, and I kind of like them better. They're not made as well as a professional framer, but they have something that I like. And by the way, there's very little paint in these. I think because I was a painter at Yale, I almost stopped painting the minute I left. Painting freaks me out because you have to be so serious. And do you know that movie, like they shoot horses, don't they? It's like when you start it, you kind of have to finish them, because if you come back the next day, you're a different person, and then you have to start all over again. So it used to be like, oh my God. I mean, there would be times when I wasn't sleeping at all for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 days, or, probably some. But so this is the studio. But so I take pictures of things all the time, bad pictures, but flowers, my flowers, botanical references, Chinese herbal books, or all of that stuff, and it's just a kind of flow. Like the more complicated it gets, the more the Rolodex keeps adding an image, and I find that I remember something from a long time ago, and I'll find that thing. And so I kind of like to surprise myself. There is no, what's it called? There's no plan. But when I'm on a roll, I find that I'm thinking so nicely. Like I get it now. I get what I'm doing. Before I was just adding things with no meaning. And then all of a sudden it's like, I get it. And so I can move things about and change them, and it looks like it has a focus, not a tight focus, but a focus of sorts.
And it seems to me there's a consistency, especially recently, in this kind of outcome that's a meditative environment, or meditative. It's a specific mindset that I see that you're in.
Yeah. And to answer your questions about moving to the Hudson Valley, I'm in Tivoli now. Close to Bard College. When I left Canal Street, when I left the city, even in Brooklyn, I could get so many supplies. I mean, New York City is like amazing. Up here, I have to go onto Amazon, or, the interesting thing is RNF and Caustics is up here. So, and that was a great find for me. But trees die here, leaves fall here. So my store is really the land. And, you know, it's so interesting to me how many things I find and how beautiful they are. And I'm not like a gardener. I just need a certain amount of color, so I'm always planting things. But I don't know. So I'm at peace now with not having a store close by. That really took me quite a long time to come to terms with. Yeah. And they are more floral. I have to admit that. I don't want to. A lot of flowers.
And so these are more intimate works.
Yes.
And does that give you a relief from the big installations where you need a team of assistants?
Well, you know, the team is quite small, by the way. When I'm in the studio, I usually the assistants certainly do help me move things, and if I need 20 brackets, they can make those or so. But the work is pretty solo. I wait till everybody leaves to do things. I mean, it's sort of stupid, but
Just because
but
you're
also,
not,
you know, what happens is galleries don't want installations. I mean, the work is hard enough to sell anyway. And if you have one big difficult thing, unless you're a superstar, then you know, no one is interested.
yeah.
Yes.
Let's talk about, this is the most
Yeah.
recent one that I
Yeah.
saw. And
Yeah.
so take us through this.
This is Pamela Salisbury, and the good news is Pamela said the gallery's closed from, you know, January to May, so you can take all your time. I was probably there about 3 weeks or so before it opened. It's a 4-story concrete building.
Carriage house, former
Carriage house. And the middle of it is an elevator, which they used to bring the carriages up into it, you know, on it. So I'd never done anything with the vertical. All my stuff is always horizontal. You walk through it. It's, you know, this was like, how am I going to do this? You know, anyway, I started, and it was middle of winter. I was starting, and I had just put a new studio up, and it didn't even have heat. So I went very slowly. There's lots of, what I like about this piece is I met a fellow named Joe Upham, and he knows a lot about neon. And he was staying in the front house where I am. And so I don't know if you can see a little bit of neon in there, but there's lots of neon in this piece. So there's
throughout
the whole thing. Yeah. There's lots of poured foam and plastics and light bulbs and neon light bulbs. And so I learned how to do that. I bent the glass, and Joe put the ends on it, the electrodes, and hooked up the transformers. So, and it went up through. So that the first images you saw were the first floor. The second floor was all blue and black,
which was a little bit of funereal compared to the ground floor, which was jubilant.
Yeah, it's very different. I wanted every floor to have really different sensations. The top floor, you can kind of see it looks also blue, but it was actually much more white than the photographs look.
So were you thinking of the pandemic or these difficult times we're living in for this mood in this particular installation?
You know, David, probably, but not, you know, what I was telling you about the class that I'm teaching now, I just want them to sort of have more joy in their life and be a little more upbeat. So for me, I wanted to have 3 layers, like kind of the earth, to the sky, you know, sort of kind of a chaotic ground floor, a kind of structural and dark middle floor, and then the top was kind of ascending. Celestial, yeah. But certainly I didn't tell anybody that. I didn't tell Pamela that. But it had a nice read, and I was so pleased, because building in a void is not the easiest thing to do. And a lot of my stuff, I don't want you to see I want it to be fluid. So I don't want you to see the work that goes into it. And there's a lot of navigating space and figuring out structural things, and but it should look light.
You covered the windows of the doors in a fantastic way.
Yeah, that looked quite nice, didn't it? Yeah. And what's so funny, David, is those doors were always had a lot of plywood on them, and no one knew that there was glass. Or not only was there wasn't actually glass in there, but it was a diamond door. It wasn't a square window in that door, which was covered up. When I took it out, it was like, oh my God, there's this beautiful diamond window, and so the on the second floor with the blue and black, the image went straight through to that glass,
Uh-huh. So Judy, we have some questions from the audience. So should we take some time and look at those? We have
Sure.
a bunch of them. Besides photography and painting, what other mediums do you enjoy incorporating into your work? Say a little more about how lighting complements your.
Oh my goodness, yeah, light right now.
And that comes from
If you look
Suzanne
at all this room,
Joelson.
there
Hi,
are like,
Suzanne.
sorry?
Suzanne Joelson wants to
Oh,
know.
hi, Suzanne. Yeah, the light bulbs. I went to India a few years ago, maybe now 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And, like Chinatown, India is like 10 times the volume and the kind of light and the kind of things that so as soon as I got back, there were just light bulbs got into everything. So that is a really active and important. When the lights go out on those pieces, they disappear, or they don't have what they do have with the light. And also, wax and caustics, I'm very fond of using it because it's a sloppy paint, but it comes in stick form and it can dry, unlike paint. Like I said, I sort of have fear of paint, but encaustic is drier and easier for me to not mess around with as much as I did when I was a painter. So, but I like steel. I do. I am crazy about steel. I mean, I have a Quonset hut full. I mean, do you know the price of steel lately? I got a fortune in this Quonset hut. It's because I bought out at Marist. I bought out a whole shop which was closing of all their steel 20 years ago, and I'm still using it. So
wow, that's a nice segue to this next question. Jean Curie wants to know, you mentioned that your installations lack permanence. They're just temporary. And I guess we didn't talk about this much, but you sometimes repurpose your materials. How do you do that? How do you decide to do that after an installation has run its course?
That's just begun to happen because now I have a huge space and 10 acres of land, so I can save things. It used to be like I don't know how many installations I've done, 150 lots, and they're really full of material. It was just thrown away because who can store that? Now it's a curse. I actually saved some of this stuff. So it's like, oh my God. But with the piece that was at CR10, Grasshopper, because I was running through this kind of time sequence, there was the opening image was a part of a show from Pavel Zubak. And then one image was from a show maybe a month or two before. So if I can find a place for it and it has something still, I now will use it. Earlier, I would save all the structural steel and just cut the image apart and just have lengths of it so I could reuse that. But I used to say, like, I never would do that because it was like putting a Volkswagen fender on a Cadillac or something. There's still fenders, but it doesn't work. But now I think there's a kind of fluidness to the work that can accommodate old and new easier. I don't know why that is. I think it's because it's just hanging around the house, so I kind of re-see it, you know.
This one was actually from Suzanne. I got the name wrong on the other one. You upstairs at the hut in the show at Pamela Salisbury,
Yes.
you had a whole room full of your works on paper, framed works on paper.
Yeah.
And she wants to know, do you think of those more as drawings or prints?
I do. I think of them as drawings. I do. And they're like so easy and nice. And I don't, you know, I'm not welding. I'm not, you know, it's like going on a holiday into the drawing studio. It's so, I can spin things out. I can change things. Nothing's that precious. Nothing's heavy. Nothing breaks. Well, sometimes they smush around a bit, but yeah, I think of them as drawings. Anything in a frame or flat-ish, I think of a drawing. And I do draw like traditional drawing. But I do a tremendous amount of prints. So I think there is that, and there's stencils. You know, a lot of that work has, I have a little laser cutter, so I make my own stencils. So, hi, Bruce.
Judy's saying hi. Jen Dragon has another wonderful question too. Hi, Jen. Do you see a connection between your work and antique star charts, cartography, and other?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your installations seem to be about mapping in the same way that historic engraving sought to describe mathematics of the universe and or document life forms in lieu of a camera.
Yes, I think subliminally that comes up into the work a lot. And I am not a very religious person, and I'm not, but everything about Buddhism and even, you know, Rudolf Steiner and Hilma af, all that stuff, the spinning of the stars and the moon and the sun and the universe. I like the very big, I like the very little. Everyone does. You know, it's a silly thing to keep saying, but those juxtapositions, they just thrill me. And I'm getting easier. Like when I was younger, obviously, you have ideas, as Al used to say. What's your idea? You know, and now it's like, I don't know what the idea is. It's like, I'm just living my life. I have big thoughts and little thoughts and stupid thoughts. And
well, here's the big question.
No.
I guess we have time for one more question, Doug. Is that it? One more. This is from Karen Snofer, and she's asking, saying, you are brilliant at balancing chaos and order. Do you ever feel like things are overwhelmingly chaotic?
No. I actually, when I look at other people's work who I think are really fearless with space and things, no, there's a formality in the work that pisses me off, because I would like to be, you know, giddy, you know, like a child, and not kind of know. I was educated with a lot of structure and a lot of understanding, or at least paying attention to form and color and composition and all that stuff. So I would like it to all go away. No, it doesn't. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm underwhelmed by how unloose I am, you know, how organized a lot of the work is. I think there's a look about it that looks, well, it certainly does look messy. I mean, I've heard that, but but I don't know. No,
How do you,
I want to get looser.
you want to get looser?
Yeah.
But how do you maintain your optimism generally in your life?
I don't know, because I'm not an optimist. I'm not. I mean, if you could look over here, I'm watching MSNBC, you know, it's on 24/7. And I am crazed about what's happening in the universe and the politics. And who knew that people were so crazy and divided? And I think I need it. I think, you know, the light bulbs, I need them. Like people come and it's like, oh, you haven't taken your Christmas lights down. It's like, no, because they're here all the time. You know, I just need it. I need to see the color. I need to get out of myself and my nervousness and, you know, the dilemmas of things. So, but I do like to go to parties. I do like that.
Good. That sounds like a good place to end.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I want to start by thanking our guests, Judy Pfaff and David Ebony, as well as our exhibition director, Ursula Morgan, the Byrdcliffe administrator, Heather Olson, also our Zoom operator, Judy Kerman, and the members of the forum committee. If you've enjoyed what you've just watched, tell a friend to visit it on YouTube. And by all means, donate to Byrdcliffe by visiting our website and clicking on the donate button. It's very easy to do. And thank you all for attending tonight.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great to talk with you, Judy. Bye.